Yes, we are indoctrinating children from the first grade through college, every grade, private schools, the ideology of the revolution, the ideology of socialism, our ideology.
I wanted to present you with a little gift which represents what President Obama and Vice President Biden and I have been saying, and that is we want to reset our relationship.
Let's do it together.
We worked hard to get the right Russian word. Do you think we got it?
You get it wrong.
I got it wrong.
It should be перезагрузка. And this says перегрузка, which means overcharged.
Well, we won't let you do that to us, I promise.
Well, it was a tough reset at the beginning with U.S.-Russian relations. And there you saw Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez bloviating, as Bill O'Reilly would say. Then you have North Korea, other hotspots, several nations that present foreign policy challenges not quite up to the level of the others we've discussed so far, but still vital to U.S. national interests, of course. We're back with our panel. Charles, after that rough reset, let's start with Russia.
Well, I know it's Christmas, and I hate to be repeatedly and relentlessly pessimistic, but this has not been a good year with U.S. relations with Russia. The naivete of the administration and its dealings are represented in that clip. The reset is a way of saying we are not the Bush administration, but it also means that we're living in a new world of cooperation. It's not zero-sum. Rivalries are abandoned. It's absurd. What we did is we canceled an agreement that we had with the Poles and the Czechs on a nuclear defense shield as a way to appease the Russians in the hope, I suppose, of achieving Russian support on sanctions with Iran. We have gotten absolutely nothing as a result. And as a result, East Europeans are wondering whether they really are independent as a result of the end of the Cold War, or whether Russia retains a veto over over their strategic decisions. And the answer looks as if it is. Their position in the world really is intermediate and not independent. It's a kind of an abandonment with, again, nothing in return. And what we're seeing also in the negotiations over nukes, this is something, a continuation of the Strategic Arms Reduction Agreement, something that the Russians are seeking because their nukes are old and decaying and obsolete, gaining an advantage over us, again in a pursuit, I think, on the American side of a treaty which is not necessary, which will only help the Russians. And it makes it look as if we are desperate for any agreement, regardless of whether it achieves our national interest. The Russians understand that, and they are using our weakness to their advantage.
You know, I think that it very well might end up being the way Charles describes it, but I think the jury is still out. This has been a year-long experiment in engagement on the part of the Obama administration. They've tried to push the reset button, try a new tack, a different way of approaching these countries, and at some point we're going to know whether it paid off or not. Now, I agree with you. So far, the Russians haven't been forthcoming on sanctions against Iran, but they've made some of the right noises, and very soon it's going to come time to either ante up or not, because this string is running out on Iran, and either the Russians will be with us on tough sanctions, as will the Chinese, or they won't. And then we'll find out whether this was a useless engagement policy or not.
You're a little pessimistic,
Well,
Charles.
I mean, a noise is not a policy or a
Well,
concession.
not yet, but I mean, at some point they either have to sign on or sign
Yeah,
off.
but all we're hearing are noises, and I'd be surprised if after all the unilateral concessions, the Russians, who don't have a history of unilateral concessions, are going to engage in it.
Steve, I want to turn to North Korea. The envoy sent there, Stephen Bosworth, says that the recent talks were successful, or at least moving the ball forward. You've been fairly critical of both the Bush administration and the Obama administration's outreach to North Korea.
Yeah, this is one area where we didn't see a reset. We saw them take a flawed policy, I think a deeply flawed policy, of the Bush administration, and in some ways make it worse. The talks that Stephen Bosworth just had were not part of the six-party talks that I think we should be skeptical about in any case. They were bilateral public talks with North Korea. And what I think makes that so problematic is that it's what the North Koreans have been demanding from the United States for years. So it's a concession. We need to recognize that it's a concession. What's worse about the North Korea policy right now is when President Obama gave his Nobel Peace Prize speech, he gave a laundry list of countries where people are oppressed. He talked about human rights in what, at least rhetorically, was a fairly compelling way. He didn't mention North Korea. And then on the very next day, the White House put out a statement in recognition of International Human Rights Day. Also didn't mention North Korea. This is days after Stephen Bosworth came back. North Korea is running essentially a modern-day gulag, concentration camps, prison camps, death camps for its citizens. And the president, who said in his Nobel Peace Prize speech that he would speak out no matter the costs, didn't even mention it.
General, militarily, we still have troops out there. Right. We've talked, we've changed the talk about striking North Korea. We did that just a year ago.
Right.
What about from a military perspective?
Yeah, the North Koreans have 1.2 million men under arms, 80% of them within about 50 kilometers of the demilitarized zone. They look like a huge military threat, but really, to be honest with you, they're not. They have old equipment, 50-0 equipment. The Army is malnourished, it's tired, it's poorly trained, very poorly equipped, short on ammunition, and the North Koreans have to have a motive to go south. There's only one that I've heard of that has any credence at all, and that's this sort of implosion scenario. Just one last roll of the dice on the part of Kim Jong-il to maintain power in North Korea. But really, that's not the big threat in the North. The big threat is what some call implosion. What if the regime just collapses in on itself through famine and mismanagement and corruption and just the evil nature of that regime? Suddenly you have 22 million malnourished people who are looking for a place to go, either north to China or south to South Korea, and that would be our problem, not Kim Jong-il's problem.
Quickly, Mara, to our south, you have Venezuela that obviously is at least getting a lot of attention because Hugo Chavez talks a lot, and you have Cuba. And the interesting potential problems those two places cause.
I think that for the Obama administration, Cuba offers more opportunity than Venezuela. Venezuela is what it is. It's not threatening us, although as annoying as Chavez is. But in Cuba, I think there really is a strong dissident movement that's being repressed there. The president had a kind of online interview with a Cuban dissident blogger recently. And I think that Cuba is the country that could change, I think, faster than any of the other dictatorships in Central America.
Open the doors?
Well, I don't know about open the doors, but at some point that regime is going to have to change. And the Obama administration has taken steps to make some of the interaction between Cuban exiles in Miami and Cuba easier in terms of money remittances.
Well, when we come back, we're going to talk more about President Obama's foreign policy approach, his tone, whether that is changing and has changed through the year.
Hello, this is Chaplain Captain David Merrifield here at Ali Base, Iraq, wanting to wish my mother and father, Grace and Morris Merrifield, a Merry Christmas there in Rutland, Vermont. God bless you.